Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Michelle Bauman.
And I'm Patrick Cordova.
This week on Heroic Media, several DC elementary schools bring babies into the classroom to teach students empathy.
An investigative report reveals the harrowing facts behind the U.S. sex trafficking trade.
And a Nebraska college invests millions into dorms for single mothers.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media. So here at Heroic Media, we explore news headlines that deal with a lot of foundational moral issues, a lot of issues that deal with family, marriage, and life.
Exactly, and we focus on those because they're just so foundational to our society. They're, they're really, really very important. And
Exactly.
Our stories tend to revolve around abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly. So what's our first story?
Thanks, Patrick. A recently launched program in DC elementary schools has found a unique way to teach students about emotion. They bring babies into the classrooms to teach students about empathy.
A really interesting story.
It's
Kinda,
very interesting.
Yeah, caught me off guard because I was like, when you think about kids, acting out and, fighting with each other and being violent and, disrupting, you don't think about like, oh, well, let's just bring in a baby
babies,
and that'll
right?
fix everything.
Yeah, I don't know where they got this idea originally, but it sounds like it's working.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I thought was really interesting.
It is interesting. It's kind of an alternative approach, it sounds like. Not a lot of, it sounds like, of course, there's some pushback from it. People don't think that it's really that going to work that well, but apparently it's in the cases that they've done it in the situations they've introduced this method, it's worked pretty well. So.
Yeah, it started in Canada, and then they've brought it down into DC now, and it's called the Roots of Empathy program.
Yes.
There are 5 elementary schools in DC that have started it, and what they do is they bring in a baby to visit the classroom 9 times throughout the year.
Right.
And the kids are able to interact with the baby a little bit, to look the baby in the eye and say hi, and then just watch the baby and ask questions and see how the baby reacts to different things, when the baby's crying, when the baby's playing. And so they're supposed to, through this, to learn about emotions.
Right.
And some of the reactions to this, one 10-year-old student said, it's made people nicer.
Yeah.
The teachers said that the students have become more thoughtful and less likely to misbehave. Parents say that the kids are more patient with their siblings, they're more helpful, and they're less demanding at home.
Right.
And there was actually a study done at the University of British Columbia that found that students had a decline in aggressive bullying behavior and a growth in sharing and cooperative behavior.
Right.
So apparently this is really working, making the children more respectful, and it really does enhance their lives to be around babies.
Exactly. And I just find that kind of fascinating. It's just, I think one of the reasons why it works so well is because it kind of takes you out of this, out of a threatening situation or whatever. You know what I mean? It seems like if a teacher or a parent or somebody is trying to resolve a conflict or something, maybe it might be easier to see how people react to things and how emotions occur and all these sorts of things and learn empathy when you aren't necessarily directly involved in this heated emotional situation, right? You can kind of take yourself out of that situation, then kind of learn from the most innocent, humans around, little children, and it's just interesting. I think that that's one of the reasons why it works so well. Just knowing my experience with my kids, and I used to work at a rec center and taught lots of kids and sports and things like that. So I think it makes sense to kind of step out of
Absolutely,
that
yeah. And I think it's very natural that we can learn things like that from babies. What I thought was a little bit surprising is that they need to bring these babies into a classroom setting for people to learn from them. And I think, it's just that we don't have as many babies around anymore.
That's what I was
people
thinking.
Have smaller families.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I'm not at all surprised that being around babies makes these children more patient and growth in sharing and cooperative behavior, because when I was 4 years old, I had a baby sister that was born, and I remember I actually asked my mom if we could send her back, and my mom explained that that's not how it works.
Yeah, right.
But I had been the baby of the family, and then all of a sudden, here's this other little baby who's taking up all the attention and the time.
Exactly.
But I learned how to share and how to cooperate, and I learned that life is not always about me.
Right.
And I was forced to become patient, even if I didn't want to.
Absolutely.
So I think, yeah, it's true. Babies are good for us, but we used to learn that naturally. People would have big families, and there would be, you'd be near your cousins and things. And now the average woman in America has just about 2 children, based on the 2014 estimates. So we're seeing fewer kids. A lot of, about half kids there are going to be the youngest child, so they're not being exposed to babies as much.
The average is like just under 2.
Right.
So yeah, it's crazy, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I felt the same thing when I was learning about this story. Is like I felt like I have a similar situation to you because I'm the oldest. When my little brother was born, I remember my mom telling me stories about how I kicked her, and when she was feeding him, and I just was like so mad. All the attention was gone. And I do think that having multiple siblings does help. It helps you, like you said, it helps you kind of get over yourself, really.
Absolutely.
But and I think in this case, we can't say obviously that that all of those kids don't have siblings or anything like that.
We don't know.
But I think just having that extra devoted time, and maybe somebody that's not related to you, can help out in just kind of letting your guard down and being able to observe and interact in a way that can change people. It has a positive impact not only on like relationships and interaction, but it branches out into so many other things too, including things like grades are noted to be improved.
And it was interesting, because I would just never have drawn a connection here, but the article mentioned that President Obama has talked about an empathy deficit in our country, that we lack this compassion and empathy for each other. And could that actually be in some way connected to a decline in the pro-life, pro-baby culture? I don't know. I don't think that's entirely to blame. That's not 100% the cause, but it was interesting to sort of say, maybe there's a connection there.
I thought that was an interesting connection too. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting story. All right, for our next story, sex trafficking is the 3rd most profitable illicit industry in the world. And you might be surprised to find out that there's one small town in Mexico that is responsible for the majority of sex trafficking in the U.S. So sex trafficking, as we know, has become like a big problem worldwide. And it's such a vile, horrible thing. And so there was a documentary that was done, and you can go to fusion.net/Pimp City. And they have this video documentary that they did, and it's really fascinating. I recommend everybody go check it out. But it's all centered on this little town in Mexico called Tenancingo. And there's only 10,000 people that live in this town, but it's estimated that 3,000 to 4,000 of the men in this town are pimps. And it's just incredible. And it's pretty much like a pimp city. And it's horrible. It's become like a family business over the past 50 years that this has been going on. And so even like grandmothers and mothers and sisters and these women will be involved in this sex trafficking industry. And it's not just something that's going on in Mexico, because what these businessmen, these pimps will do is they will kidnap and persuade women to be their boyfriend or whatever, and then pretty much they kidnap them and rape them, beat them, and then they send them off to cities in the U.S. all over the place. And specifically in New York, Queens, New York is a prime spot. I guess they get tons of business there, and so it's just this. It was a crazy to hear everything that was going on in this documentary. What were your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that struck me most, it was sort of connecting the Mexico side with the U.S. side.
Yeah.
But from the U.S. side, the Department of State says that there are between 14,000 and 18,000 people who are trafficked in the U.S. every year. But the Bureau of Justice says that there are only about 200 victims who are rescued by authorities every year. That means that there are over 10,000 victims who are still out there every single year, who are being brought into the U.S. and just left here, and who have not escaped, who have not been rescued. So that was just, the numbers there were shocking to me. And there was a quote here that I thought that really just said it all, but from Loretta Lynch, who is the U.S. Attorney of the Eastern District of New York. And she said, "This is nothing more than modern day slavery. Wars have been fought to end that in this country, and this is not something we can tolerate in America." So just looking at that and saying, that's what this is slavery.
Right, it is. And the reason it's slavery too, because I know in the documentary they mentioned that some of these guys that are coming in to use these prostitutes, which are really sex slaves. They're not. It's not like they actually want to be in this business. They feel they've been kidnapped, they've been beat, they've been raped, and they're threatened. And sometimes they have kids and family back in Mexico, and they say if you leave or you do this or you go to the cops, then we'll kill your family.
Right. I think that's very important.
Yeah, they threaten them. They're coerced. They're taken. They're coerced and threatened and harassed, and just the conditions and the things that they put these people through, these poor women through, is just horrific. Like they'll have sex with up to 60 men per day.
Right.
And they'll work sometimes they'll make them work 20 hours a day, and then that leaves 4 hours for sleep, I guess, and then back at it again the next day, 7 days a week. And I mean, it's just horrific, like the things that they do to these women.
Absolutely. I think that's a common misconception that this is, these women choose this, that this is their line of work.
Yeah.
But these are women who, were vulnerable for whatever reason. Either they ran away from home or, they were tricked and manipulated into a relationship that they didn't realize. They were kidnapped. But whatever, in a moment of vulnerability, they were preyed upon and they are being coerced. They cannot get out of it. And it really is a type of slavery.
And it's just sad too, because a lot of them are taken when they're like at the age of like 13, 14 years old too, very young. And it's just horrible, like all the statistics and the things that are done. And I recommend that you really watch the documentary, because it doesn't do it justice just like us chatting about all these statistics and things, but it was just really shocking. And especially in Queens, New York, they dropped off this journalist and said, go walk down the street, and and it was like a matter of minutes, he walked up to this guy and he's like, oh, you want to buy something? And he had like a little stand, and the guy was like, and he was like, what are you looking for? And it immediately turned into this like, where can I get some sex at? And it's like, what? And he's like, go down to that guy over there. And he walked down to this other guy. He walked around the building to this alley into this sex slave, and there's women in there, and it's just like, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
It's just like it's right in front of our faces, even here in Denver.
Sex trafficking is a problem in every major city in the United States. People don't realize it, but it is a huge problem. And I think, thankfully, it is something that there is a growing awareness of. People are starting to realize it. They've had several hearings in Congress revolving around it. There's really an international, at this point, effort to stop it, which is what it's going to take, because it's not just a local problem.
Oh, yeah.
As we see from this story, there is an international dimension here.
Yeah, absolutely. There certainly is. And I find it fascinating just because you would think, why would people want to be involved in this business? But it's very, very lucrative. It's said that they make like $500,000, each pimp makes like $500,000 a year. And so, of course, coming from Mexico, a very poor area, you can see why that they would just be like, okay, this is the easy path. And even their children, they grow up wanting, they're 5, 6 years old, they want to be a pimp. So it's just a real sad situation.
Very much so.
Okay, coming up after the break, we're going to have a special guest to discuss single mother dorms.
Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. For this segment, we have a special guest joining us, Lauren Martinez. She's the Rocky Mountain Regional Coordinator for Students for Life of America. Thanks for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here.
All right, and we're going to be discussing the following story. We're going to be discussing single mother dorms, and specifically the all-women College of St. Mary in Omaha, Nebraska, which is among very few colleges in the nation that offers single mother dorms. And so single mother dorms are also hailed as vital to the pro-life effort. So I guess we can kind of start there, because a lot of times when you think of like the pro-life movement, you think of abortion. And a lot of times that's all people think of when they think pro-life. So how are these single mother dorms kind of related to the pro-life movement and helping the pro-life movement?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we see a growing trend in providing maternity homes on campus and really expanding the resources for pregnant parenting students in college especially. And the reason why that's so important to the pro-life movement is because we have to be dedicating as much support and resources to our pregnant and parenting students as we are to the baby. The babies are just as important as the moms, and we know just as well if we lose the mom, we lose the baby.
Absolutely. I think that's so key. Can you describe to us maybe some of the challenges that that these moms face when they realize that they're a student, they have an unplanned pregnancy? What kind of resources do they need?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we have to look at it from the perspective of, okay, now she's pregnant, whether the circumstances are good or bad, she still needs a place to stay. So whether or not she's living in the dorms, she's going to hit the time in which the school really deems her a liability for she's pregnant, can she even live in the dorms? And so usually it falls around the second trimester. So finding a place to stay after her second trimester of pregnancy, a car if she has it, if she's on her parents' insurance.
Right.
Oftentimes students are under the student insurance programs that universities require them. So figuring out, does that provide prenatal care? Does that provide all of the visits she needs for her baby before the baby's born and after? And all of these things don't even go into her schoolwork. And so whether or not there's a desk to fit her when she's 7, 8, 9 months pregnant in the classroom, can she take maternity leave? I mean, there's so many different questions. And then once the baby's born, you have childcare. And so if she has to pay for childcare, and oftentimes colleges, if they do have childcare, it's only available to the faculty. And so really expanding to say, is it even available to the students?
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I was in college, I remember it was so hard just to get all my everything studied and all my assignments turned in. Like, I can't imagine being a parent. And so in the pro-life movement, I think it's so important because a lot of times, at least maybe not a lot of times, but I've certainly heard abortion supporters say, "Oh, you just want the baby to be born. You don't care anything about it. You don't care about the mother. And there's like that kind of, I guess, negative thing thrown at the pro-life movement. But this is a great example of how, kind of a holistic approach, I think, to things and helping a mother out in that situation. I can only imagine, like, if I was in that situation, I would need a lot of help. And so I think that reaching out and providing these types of things, like you said, childcare and a place to stay is critical.
It is. It definitely is. And really providing the support system. And I think that's what we're seeing in these maternity homes is that being a pregnant student or a parenting student isn't out of the norm anymore.
Right.
It's growing in numbers in our country.
Yeah.
And so how do we put these young women who are facing unplanned pregnancies together so that they can network and share their experiences and really have the support system so they know, hey, I'm really struggling with this. How did you get through this? How did you finish your classes? How did you study for finals with a crying baby?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I think just having that those resources and that support is critical. I found a statistic that said interference with education was given as a reason for choosing abortion by 38% of women. So that's more than 1/3 said that one of the reasons they had an abortion is because it was going to interfere with their education. And I just thought, gosh, if somebody had been there to tell them, look, it's okay. We're going to be able to give you the resources that you need, the health care. We're going to be able to work, with your professors to give you a flexible schedule to ensure that you don't have to take that final while you're in labor, that
Right.
some kind of, if they had that support and they knew that they were going to be supported, how many of those women would choose to keep their babies? I mean, do you think it makes a difference?
Definitely, and I think we see that it makes a difference through talking with the students. And so when I'm traveling around to our college campuses and I'm meeting with our Students for Life groups, those groups are really the advocates for these women on campus and young men. I've met many single fathers on campus, and so it's really interesting to kind of see that also as a trend. And it's really awesome to see these Students for Life groups that are really taking different levels of making a change on campus. And so whether that's not putting a lactation room on campus full-time, a place where women can store their breast milk, a place where they can, have a diaper deck on campus in the bathrooms, or, if they really want to take up a big challenge and go up to their administration and say, hey, we need childcare on campus for these women. And I work with groups all the time that offer their own hours to say, hey, we're going to babysit 20 hours during finals week for parenting students on campus, or we're going to host a diaper drive, or we're going to, assist in a community-wide effort to bring the pregnancy resource centers information on campus, and it's really cool to see.
That's great. Yeah, and I think it really just shows, living out the Christian faith and caring for other people and for life in general. And I'd just like to talk about or say this quote here. So this is from Beth O'Malley, the Pregnant on-Campus Coordinator for Students for Life of America, and she said the following. If we're asking a woman to make a life-affirming choice, we have to actually give her opportunities and resources to make that choice, right? It seems so practical and simple, But I think a lot of times we forget about that because we get entrenched in this like battle of, laws and, pro-abortion or, pro-life. But I think that that's really the key, that we have to provide these practical means for people and show them that we support and care about life at all stages, right?
Definitely, and I think, what Beth says is so key, and one of the things that sticks in my mind is stop telling women what they can't do and start empowering them to know what they can do. Yeah. And that's definitely through showing them what resources are available, because oftentimes there are a lot of resources on college campus, but the administrations don't promote it. And so they need to be promoting these resources, and that's exactly what these student groups are doing, is advocating for that. As we know, Planned Parenthood, almost 79% of all Planned Parenthoods nationally are within 5 miles of a college campus. And so they know their clientele. Yeah. Almost half of all abortions nationally are happening to our college-age women, 18 to 24 years old. And so this is something that isn't going away. Right. I mean, our college students, when they get pregnant, we need to be the advocate that is offering the life-affirming resources for them to say, you know what, nobody should have to choose between either parenting or continuing their education.
Absolutely. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Stay tuned. We'll have one more story after the break. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Michelle Bauman.
And I'm Patrick Cordova.
In our final story for today, finding out that your teenage daughter is pregnant is a situation that no parent wants to be in. But one woman who faced this very experience found that the key to overcoming challenges is love.
I think that's a pretty good summary there, right? Overcoming those challenges is really about love. Yeah. And there's so many things that we can discuss about this type of scenario, right? Because of course, when there's you're not married, there's a child outside of wedlock, or something like that, it always is going to evoke some emotions on both sides, right?
Absolutely.
From parents and both from the person that's pregnant. And so I think that this story is great because it's one of those, well, to me at least, or society in general, it's one of those stereotypical situations where you have like a very Christian family that has 9 kids, and you look at those types of families and you tend to almost hold them to a higher standard or something like that. Like, oh, they can't, everybody's got to get married before they have kids and all these sorts of things. But when it really comes down to it, we're all human, and we all suffer from concupiscence, right? We're damaged goods, so to speak, right? The original sin affects all of us. Nobody can escape it. And so we all make mistakes. And of course, premarital sex is a mistake, but a child is never a mistake. It's always a gift from God.
Right.
And I think that we have to respond to those situations lovingly. And I think that that's really what this story is all about.
I think you're absolutely right. So this is a story of Linda Paget. So she's a 44-year-old woman, a mother of 9, and living in a very conservative Catholic community. Yeah. And one night, her 18-year-old daughter said, "Hey, Mom, I'm pregnant." Right. And so she just sort of described the reaction that went through her mind, and there was just this fear for her daughter's future and fear of judgment from the community. And I thought I think that's very honest of her to say that. And it's really unfortunate, and it's something that we have to work on, because so often there is this judgment, this, looking down on someone who made a mistake. And that's, like we talked about with our earlier story with our guest, this is not what women need when they're in this crisis pregnancy. They need the support and the love and the help. And so many times when they have that, they're going to choose life. But also just because that's what they need. It's not our job to look down on someone else who's made a mistake, because we've made mistakes too, Yeah,
we all make mistakes. And I think that's a good point. We need to be there to support these people. They are very well aware, and I'm sure they have, guilt on their conscience, and that they feel like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that, but now I've got a child, and what are my options? And of course, the world tells you, well, if you've got a problem, if you're pregnant, then you need to have an abortion. And so I think that approaching this situation like this mother did is great, because it shows an openness to, and it really reminded me of that Maya Angelou story we did a few weeks ago, because it was it was just a great example of how a mother can be tender and loving towards her daughter. I think in these situations where a mother hears or a father hears that his or her daughter is pregnant, and then they're just like, oh, get out of here, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what kind of love is that, right?
Right.
If a child is truly a gift from God, then shouldn't you be accepting that gift from God?
Right.
and welcoming of that gift. And God gives us all different kinds of crosses to bear in our lives, and this might just be one of them, right? To kind of get over yourself and get over that. Sure, you might feel embarrassed about telling people that your son or your daughter is pregnant,
Right.
but I think it's just, there's so much I could say about this,
Absolutely, and that's what Linda, she describes how she overcame those initial fears, which I think are a very natural initial reaction, and she realized that what she needed was to love her daughter, and she said, I needed to let her just talk and share. I needed to hug her and love her and tell her that we are there for her. And so she and her husband, they're Catholic, they have always acknowledged that a baby is a blessing, and so by having this open heart, they realized that this sort of traumatic announcement of this pregnancy was turned into a blessing and a grace for both her and for her daughter. She said they both managed to grow. The daughter was really growing in her faith, and the mother was growing in her love, and their relationship became closer. And so really, this is just God being able to take a difficult situation and bring so much grace and so much joy out of it,
Yeah.
more than we could even realize.
Absolutely. And I think if you look on the flip side of it, imagine the mother just, condemning her daughter and, the community judging her harshly and these sorts of things. And then, she had an abortion. I think the situation in that circumstance, at least the way I just painted it, sounds a lot worse. And I think that that's what ends up happening a lot of times. And I think that it's almost like a source of this, it's like pride is where all of that anguish and like temptation to go have an abortion over having your child comes from. It's like you don't want other people to think down of you, so you think you can hide it by going and
Right.
having an abortion. But
Right.
really, that choice ends up making a bad impact and a scar on your life that really affects you for a long time.
And it's like we said in our last story, this is such a key part of the pro-life movement, is how we respond to women in
Yeah.
these crisis pregnancies.
Yes.
Because it's not just about passing laws and saying you can't do this. It's about saying, look, let me show you how you can do this.
Right.
Let me help you do this.
Yeah.
And that is what's going to help people choose life and help women choose life. And so I think that this story is just such a great example of that. And this mom, Linda, she said, she wants women going through the same situation as her daughter to know that pregnancy is not the end of their life. And that's so true, because it can
Absolutely.
be such a scary experience. Oh my gosh, this is it. This is the end.
Absolutely.
Everything's over. And just to say, look, this is scary. There's going to be some scary moments here. But
Absolutely.
with the help and the support, you can do this.
It's the beginning of life.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can read more stories like the ones we discussed tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.